Today's guest is Rhonda Noordyk. She's a financial expert and she's the founder of the Women's Financial Wellness Center. Okay, Rhonda, I see you. Let me see if this works. Yes. Way back in June. So now it's a lot colder. And we're going to talk about there she is. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I was saying last time you were on was like several months ago, back in the summer in June. And so now I know I have like a turtleneck and coat on because it's cold and the heater's blowing on my foot. But today we're going to talk more about something called the DAM method and some other things, not about trauma-informed professionals unless somebody asks about that. But before we even get started, Rhonda, why don't you say who you are and also get into something you mentioned last time about your holistic approach to finance. So who are you and what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm Rhonda Noordyk. I'm the founder and CEO of the Women's Financial Wellness Center, and I am a financial advocate for women that are going through divorce. The holistic approach really is taking a look at the whole person, right, as they're navigating through these pieces and helping them walk step by step through the process, helping them go from a feeling of crisis, right, to confidence and closure in just a matter of months.
Yeah. And so one of the things that our people, you know, where you're dealing with the high conflict, they're not the high conflict, but the people dealing with high conflict exes through the divorce and post-judgment process is we have people telling us what we are entitled to financially, as well as other things, which is basically nothing. So how do you deal with women in particular who come to you? I imagine like they come to me and say, well, I already know my ex isn't going to agree to this, so I don't really think there's much I can do. How about we start way lower in terms of what I'm going to ask for with money?
Yeah. Gosh, you know, there's a lot to unpack here, right? Because I think at the end of the day, that certainly is something that happens. And, you know, I just got off a call, actually a couple calls today that kind of really resonate with this topic, which is, okay, what am I entitled to? And yeah, what if I'm being told that I'm only going to get, you know, X, Y, Z? And what I would say is a lot of times spouses will create a narrative, right? They'll create their own narrative on, hey, I'm being generous to you. I mean, I am giving you way more than you could get in court, which is usually for me like, that's a little bit of a red flag, right? So my response to that is always, hey, listen, they might be being generous. I don't know for sure. However, usually if they're saying that they're being generous, they're not, but okay. But
it's like someone saying, hey, I'm a good person.
Yeah,
I'm a good person.
I'm being honest. I'm being, you know, right. Okay. But at the end of the day, I think the key thing is I want women in particular, because again, that's my niche market, right, to be informed. Listen, they may be giving you a good deal, but I don't know that, and you don't know that until we do a deeper dive. Let's analyze the information. And I will always tell my clients, listen, you can tell them I'm happy to make a swift decision when I have all of the information. And that means that not only the information that they're providing, but the supporting documentation and a thorough analysis of your options. Like I just chatted with a gal today, and they have multiple properties, multiple states, right? And that is a little complicated because we need to look at what the values of those properties are, what they're cash flowing, what the tax liability may be. There's a lot that goes into it. And so it's like, oh, I'm being generous and I'll give you this one and this one and this one. Let's just do our own deeper dive to just confirm or deny, right, what's being presented. And I think at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing, but we do need to make sure that we are doing an analysis to confirm, you know, what the best option for them is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, the words that flash in my head that we say all the time, verifiable proof.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yes.
Let me just see it. Where is the proof besides what you're telling me? I'm sure you're wonderful, even though we're getting a divorce. So I need the verifiable proof. I need the supporting documents, like you said. Now, the problem with people in our community is our exes do not show what they have. There's all kinds of hidden assets. How do you deal with someone who will not produce, or they'll produce partial and they have excuses as to it's so complicated and you're not going to be able to understand it. Do you get a lot of that too?
Yeah, and I think, ultimately from my perspective, the sooner that I can get involved in some of these things, the more likely that we're able to move the needle because we're not running out of time. You know what I mean? So there's a process in asking for information, and what I have helped my clients with is it's like, okay, you can ask for information. That's kind of like the first place to start, right? We're asking for the documents. And then, right, as they ask, that's really great, but what if they don't give them to us? And I can say, I mean, maybe you have, but in the 9 years I've been doing this, I've not ever had a client whose spouse ended up in jail because they didn't produce financial documents. Have you?
No,
Okay.
never.
So this whole process of like, hey, we're just going to keep asking and we're going to keep asking, I always say is like bad parenting. Because you're like, okay, well, we're going to ask and we're going to keep asking, but there's no consequences. So then we wonder why the bad behavior continues, right? So they ask for the information. If you get it, great. If you don't ask, what I will tell my clients is, okay, I want you to go back and ask your attorney, how many times are we going to ask? How long are we going to ask for until we do something else? And the something else could be interrogatories, just written questions, dialing in the information. Could be depositions where they pull them into, a room with a court reporter. And it could be just going directly to the companies to get the information that they need. One of the things, though, that I always want to make sure is that's kind of an orchestrated piece, right, as we're going through that process. But then also we will sometimes work with private investigators where we can help with gathering and getting information that maybe otherwise isn't being fully transparent. So that's kind of where, the phrase that I developed is the dam method. And it just seems so fitting, right? Because I was kind of playing off the, hey, I've got my bridge program, so let's choose the bridge, not the dam, right? But the acronym is this. It's where people will dodge the disclosures. Yep, they do it. Like, hey, we're supposed to be filling out this paperwork, and they just aren't doing it, right? So they dodge the disclosures. They avoid getting assets valued. And what this could mean is pensions, classic cars, property, you name it. There's like, sometimes you just need a third party that can verify the value. Sometimes it's coins. I have a client right now they have a lot of coins. And she actually ended up having to go and get those valued. So she had an idea of what they were actually worth. And then the M is misrepresenting the information. It's quite simple that, they filled out the paperwork and they put, that this property, this lot that they own in another state's worth 200. We do the private investigative report and it comes back with the documentation to show it's at 880. And you're like, isn't that interesting, right? So I really love having a strategy and not waiting too long. Because I think once people are kind of in that, either I'm contemplating or in the early stages, we've got a short window to really kind of get the information. As more time goes on, I think people lose steam, like, oh yeah, well that was months ago. And so, yeah, we just really want to stay on top of that.
Yeah, and the thing about losing steam, that's something we deal with our clients all the time when we say your ex's goal is to wear you down and bleed you dry financially. And so by them dragging things out, that's their strategy. They are trying to make you exhausted so that you take less because you want to do anything you can to get it done. And I know with our clients, it's often custody and money. And they'll be like, you know what? I really am concerned about the kids. I don't even care about the money at this point. How do you deal with clients who say things like that, where they're like, you know what? I'm so tired. I just forget it.
Well, I mean, again, hopefully all along, right? If we're able to get involved early, I think we can help manage that. And certainly, again, it's a marathon. We all know, like, listen, self-care is important. I know we hear about that, but it is. It really is important because if that is the goal, right, of the other party to wear you down, then how do you prepare yourself, for that? I think the other part of it is, and again, I know that's an emotional decision. Of course, you care about your kids, right? But I think one of the reasons that we're seeing the stats so high on the lifestyle for women, right, going down after divorce by 41% is partly because there's a lot of things that go into it, but they're either being manipulated or controlled. They're being bullied into making decisions, or quite frankly, they're just like, yeah, I'm just done, right? And I think that again, we need this tribe. We need people that are like, listen, I know you're tired, okay, but we're close to the end. And, here's the strategy that we need to implement. I mean, I had a call today from a gal. They're scheduled for trial in January. And she was like, Rhonda, can you help me? And I'm like, at this point, it's mid-November. I'm booked out 4 weeks. So the soonest we could even meet would be December. I don't have the bandwidth at this point to be an expert, in your trial in January. So what could I do to help her, right? And so we were able to, I'm going to be able to, on a very limited scope, right, try to give her a couple things that I think will be helpful for her. But I'm like, man, I wish that she would have found me, right, a year and a half ago, and she wouldn't feel like she's backed up against the wall, and there would be stuff that's been done, and stuff like that. I mean, 3 attorneys later, 3 judges later, and I know you deal with this stuff too. It's like, at some point, I don't want her to just say I'm done, because she hasn't signed anything, right? And I'm like, okay, I want you to be able to finish strong. But we're also about bumping up against the reality of we're running out of time. A forensic accountant at this point probably is not going to take on a case when they have got less than 6 weeks to turn around a report that includes gathering, so at some point you just run out of time.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in our head, we always have all kinds of little words that we coin too. So we talk about where people are at in the process. And we talk about, like, I'm, for example, a grizzled veteran because it's 9 years for me. We have other grizzled veterans, 2 years, 4 years. But then we love when we meet our babies. And that's people early in the process, because we say, this is the time that you feel most overwhelmed, but you have more power right now because you haven't made those expensive mistakes yet. So you have this opportunity to do things properly. And that's basically what you're saying. Get to someone like you early on. So what are some signs that someone would know that they have to find someone like you? Because I think we're a very crisis driven organization. So our people find us after bad things have happened most of the time. But how can we change this so that people find experts like you and me, but you in particular, earlier? What are some warning signs, or what phrases should even not just the people themselves, but their friends and family look for when they think, you know what, you could probably use someone like Rhonda?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the first thing that I always say is you're looking for if there's an imbalance of power, right? If your spouse is been controlling the money, that they make more money than you, that you just feel like you maybe haven't been as involved. So that's certainly, one thing. In addition to that, I would say, if they're being overly generous, and I know that sounds kind of weird, but it really is, like, hey, don't worry about it. I'll come and I'll mow the grass, and I'll, in our area, right? Oh, I'll come and I'll plow the snow for you, and I'll take you. No,
Interesting. That is
no.
really interesting.
Right? Like,
Ooh.
I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. And here's what happens with that, right? It's, hey, I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. Really, what's happening, I think, is for women in particular. Again, I can speak to this part, and that is that they let their guard down. Rhonda, he really does want what's in my best interest. And so they stop asking questions. They stop leaning in. They stop trying to get the information, and they accept what's being presented and really feel like, yeah, I want to believe them. I get that. But to our point on how we started this conversation, it's neat. Listen, we need to trust and yet verify, or verify with the documentation, right?
I wouldn't even put trust in there. Not in this world. I wouldn't say trust. I would say, let's just, like, great, let's verify.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I
That is
think that
really
the
interesting.
trust part is hard, but I think, I think people do resonate with that because they want to trust. I'm not saying the person's even trustworthy, but I'm saying they want, really at the core, they're like, I want to trust this person. I get that. Okay. But then let's verify. And usually what happens then is in the verification process, they realize that the person's not trustworthy. And now we're kind of, right? Like, so it validates that. But yeah, I mean, those are just a couple examples of the things. And really, for me, it's for the women that want to be proactive, people that want to be proactive. Like, listen, Rhonda, I don't know what I don't know. And so I just want to make sure that I've got all of my ducks in a row. I want to make sure that I'm making the right decisions. And I think, this is an opportunity, certainly, for people to say, hey, listen, this is not a good process. This is not a fun process. But man, if I can lean in and get something out of it and walk out of this process being more informed, having a better relationship with money, being more confident about my ability to make decisions, then I feel like it's worth it. And a lot of times too, like, it's, hey, I'm going through this process and I want to be able to help other people. And I'm like, well, we got to, the old, we got to put your oxygen mask on first. But I appreciate that, because I think women are thinking about, other people as they're going through this process. And sometimes, right, it's like, it's okay for you to think about yourself and what is it that you need. And you're not being selfish, and you're not wanting to take him to the cleaners. You're just simply wanting to make sure that you're going to be fine after the divorce is over. And to that, I will say, okay, we need to define what fine is. Like, a lot of times, if, especially in higher net worth situations, the attorneys will say, oh, you'll be fine. Okay, what does that mean though? Does that mean just like accept what's even being proposed because you're making way more than the judge is going to make? Who cares? Like, why is that a benchmark for doing well?
Yeah. I mean, I just, I'm like scribbling all over the place. I'm like, where's the thing I just wrote? But yeah, people need to learn how to advocate for themselves, to understand what is, again, like what is fine for you might not really be fair. But especially what you said in terms of somebody, this I really love the part about someone who's saying, let me take care of you. I'll come over and mow the lawn. I think women tend to let hope destroy us. And there was a scene in a series, it was like Betty Broderick or something, where it showed a table of men. It was during someone's divorce, and they were all like talking money and how much of things, and the women were all talking about like, maybe you can get back together. And I'm thinking, there's an example of strategy versus hope that's going to destroy this woman who is getting the divorce. People often will say things like, I just pray the judge sees, or I just pray that they're going to do the right thing. But I think it is really important to have a plan and to understand what you're entitled to and to go deeper. So Rhonda, someone like you work with private investigators and other resources. What are some other professionals in your world where someone's like, I don't even know what my ex has? Like, when you talked about diving deeper, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really starts with taking a look at the situation and figuring out, who else might be part of it. So when we're looking at my process, which is called Bridge, the I is identify the gaps. And so that's where we take a look at, okay, where are the gaps? Is it a confidence gap? Is it a knowledge gap? Is it an expert gap? Is it a career gap? Like, we really kind of dial in those pieces. And I think it's helpful for people because they're like, okay, well, I know that people keep saying I need a forensic accountant, or I need a business valuation expert, or I need whatever, fill in the blank. And they're like, I don't even know if I need one. And quite frankly, I don't even know what they do. And so I think a lot of times what's happening is people are throwing these words around. And so part of my process is helping people say, okay, first of all, let's just take a step back. Let's identify what these roles are and who these types of people, what credentials they have and what their role is. And then what would be the purpose of bringing them in? Do we think we can move the needle? At least what the investment is, investing in those people, right? And if so, right, then how does the attorney plan to use this information, and what is their strategy? Because I'll give you a quick example. I mean, there's a bunch of them, but the one that comes to mind is I was working with a client, and they had the suggestion was a forensic accountant. So husband hired a forensic accountant, and originally it was communicated that this forensic accountant was going to actually be working with both parties. But that wasn't actually true, because the husband signed the agreement with the forensic accountant. And so the wife wasn't actually even able to talk to so she really wasn't the client. It was positioned like, now this was the husband really. Hey, listen, this forensic accountant is working for both of us. No.
So typical in our world, like this insidious.
Yes.
And I'll pay for it.
Yeah, I'll pay for it. And so he signs, right? So no communication because if she was the client, co-client, right, she would be able to talk directly to the forensic accountant, but that wasn't the case. So, okay, fine. So we get the report back, and she's reviewing it, and we're reviewing it. And we said, okay, well, we think that there's some gaps here. So what do we do about that? And so my recommendation was, I said, I think we need to interview some forensic accountants so that you can do your own analysis on the information. And it was really all hands on deck because we had done the private investigative piece and I was kind of orchestrating that. We were analyzing the data, we were pulling in the forensic person, and making sure that the attorney was on board. But my role is really kind of like the spoke. Like I'm first of all determining, okay, does it make sense for us to go down this path? Do I think we can move the needle? If so, who is the best person for this? And then let's work together as a team. And then once we got the information, the report, then again, we were working as a team. How does that fit into the financial picture for her? And the end, kind of you know, the end of the story is that we were able to move the needle at least 1.5 million more than what she would have received had we not gone down that path.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
It's awesome. And I think at the end of the day, for me, it's, I love the large numbers because you're like, you see the impact that this has. But even if it's on a smaller scale, the concept is still the same. To me, it doesn't matter, multiple seven figures or not. I just want to move the needle. I want women to be, to level the playing field on the power and, the power differential. And I want women to be able to ask good questions and make good decisions. And, I think a lot of times people will think, oh yeah, well, again, the higher net worth, they're going to be fine, or they don't need help. No, I really feel like at some level, everybody needs help. And the question is, what help and how much? So like when we think about the therapy or the coaching part, I think it's easy for us to think, okay, well, we can dial the needle or dial the dial up or down. I need more support because I'm really feeling like I'm a mess. Okay, great. Then dial in more support. Hey, I'm feeling like things have stabilized a little bit. I'm kind of in a good spot. I can dial it back a little bit. Maybe it's only once a week or once every other week or whatever. Same thing with legal and financial. You can dial it up. We can dial it up. We can dial it down, depending on, again, what level of support that they feel like they need. But having that core team of legal, financial, emotional, whatever that looks like, I call it the essential team because and I've been doing this. I know that there's kind of things have been shifting over the last 9 years where more and more people are like, yes, team. But I was doing that, Lisa, before anybody else was. 9 years ago when I started my business, I was all about team. And I'm still all about team because it works.
Yeah.
And, and people need it.
Yeah. So what you mentioned, I took of course, more notes that now I'm looking at. Talking about moving the needle and deciding who the person is and if it's what the lawyer can do in terms of strategy. I was thinking also about something we call cost benefit analysis. So for example, we know somebody who is a certified fraud investigator. So he can find all sorts of things hidden in fence poles, bars of gold, all kinds of, he knows all kinds of tricks. But he said, I cost about $15,000. So in order to even justify paying that much amount to somebody that may or may not find anything, we always say to our clients, we have to think about how much it's going to cost you in terms of what you might actually be able to use, like you said. So not even what you might be able to find, but what the lawyer might be able to get you if it gets to court or in some kind of settlement. So I think that's important. The other thing I was thinking of is in terms of lawyers. So people often assume that they don't need a team. They're like, well, I have a divorce attorney and that person's an expert. But I've heard other professionals, especially financial professionals, say, but your family law attorney is probably not a financial expert. Can you talk about why it is important to have not just a lawyer and maybe a therapist or a support group, but that financial person as part of that team?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before I do that, I do want to just circle back on the cost benefit analysis because I think that is a really important exercise. I call it the return on investment. But basically, what is the cost, right? Because I think a lot of times the attorneys will say, and again, we need attorneys, right? But a lot of times they say, oh, well, it's not going to be worth it to do it. But again, we got to take it one step further and say, okay, but what does that mean, right? Is it, because I cannot think of a time that I have, as part of my process, suggested that somebody do something and it didn't work out. We've always been able to move the needle. However, we are doing that analysis. Okay, what is the investment? What's the potential return on investment? What does that look like? What information do you need, to make a good decision? And then ultimately it's their decision. But I think it is a really important part for people to do, and not just dismiss it because the attorney's like, oh, you don't want to go down that path, it's going to be too expensive. But what does that mean?
Right. Or the opposite. You need to do all this stuff. I call it the feeding frenzy.
Yep.
Because they see this couple has a lot of money, so you need this. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. Question.
It's really customized. I mean, at the end of the day, it's looking at the situation, identifying, again, the gaps, trying to figure out how do we close the gaps, and are there additional people that we need to help do that? And then the next part of that, right, was, hey, why do you need a financial person? So, you know, from my perspective, again, the way that I run my business is I not only crunch the numbers, but I'm also helping develop the strategy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people crunch the numbers, hey, here's a report, but they're not necessarily doing a deeper dive on what does that mean for you. So my business encompasses the analytical part, the educational piece, and then also the coaching piece. There is a coaching element to how I run my business, and it's financial coaching. I went through the certification early on in my career because I wanted to help people with their attitudes and beliefs about money at a deeper dive. So, you know, that's certainly, again, I can tell you that in the time that I've been doing this work, we've been able to move $22 million into the hands of women that otherwise would have been left on the table. So,
wow.
And again, I mean, can I work with everybody and, you know, whatever? I mean, really, I want to work with the people that want help, right? That they see a value in having, you know, a financial person as part of their team. I'm not necessarily in the business of convincing them that they need me, but, you know, people have reached out and like, hey, I'm just going to go with an attorney. Okay, you know what? Well, if anything changes, you know, and I'm still have bandwidth to help you, then, you know, reach back out. And I did actually have somebody do that. She reached out 6 months ago, went down the, you know, attorney only route, spent 13 grand in legal fees, felt totally stuck with not a whole lot to show for it on the financial side, and reached back out and ended up hiring me to help her. And I was like, oh my gosh, if we could have been working together for the last 6 months, we'd be a heck of a lot further than we are now. But okay. And thankfully,
and a lot less money spent, I bet, too.
Yeah, it was just a waste. It was so frustrating. But
yeah.
You know.
All right, you're getting another question here. Is forensic accounting going to help or hurt me?
Well, I guess there's a few more questions to that, right? Without knowing the situation. I mean, who is the one who's actually requesting that? Are you requesting it? Are they requesting it? Yeah, I don't really know exactly how to answer that question without knowing a little bit more about, you know, the situation. I mean, at the end of the day, my philosophy is usually more information is better.
Same. Right? You can choose what you want to listen to, but at least you have it.
I mean, we just did that with a client who her husband owns a business. He's in the financial industry. And he basically was telling her, oh yeah, the business isn't worth much, or, oh, I'm going to be really, you know, I'm going to be really generous and all this stuff. Yeah. So behind the scenes, we were actually able to do an analysis on the business, on what we thought the business was worth. And we were able to do it based on the information that was provided. So we didn't need his permission, which was great. And we just kind of held it kind of behind the scenes. And then she went into mediation and he said, oh yeah, my business is worth, you know, 250 or whatever. And we had the documentation to know that it's actually worth about 2.2 million. And
right, so there's leverage. That's leverage.
And so she didn't really, I told her, I'm like, listen, there's times when we just gotta, it's not if we share the information, it's when. And she did nothing wrong. We got the information. We were able to use all the information that was provided, and she got a number. But the tricky part with that, Lisa, was she came out of mediation kind of second guessing. And I said, listen, this is the time when, you know, he said he was going to be generous. He said he was going to, you know, play nice and all this stuff. And now that you're in it, you're really seeing even more of the true colors. And so we just need to regroup. I want you to lean into the fact that we have the data to support this. And you need to reach back out to your attorney.
Yeah. I want to say something about that second guessing. So second guessing and feeling like it was a defeat is so normal, at least in my world, where even when you've had a successful mediation or a successful court date, you come out and question yourself. And I often talk about how the night after something like that is filled with sleeplessness because we're always thinking, did I interpret that right? Like, what did that mean?
Yeah.
So that's that's normal in
Yes.
our world, like
Yes.
completely normal
Yes.
to feel like I didn't have this huge victory. It doesn't feel like I have this huge victory. And that's why I think it's important, and I don't know if you do this, but we do, is to debrief and
Yes.
kind of talk through what actually happened, because
Yes.
it is really mediation. It can be very dramatic. Often our people are with their exes who there's always domestic violence involved. And so there's a lot of psychological stuff that happens and trauma, being re-traumatized, that I feel like it's helpful to talk people through it and talk them down afterwards. I almost feel like I need it more after court than before court,
Yeah.
the night before, the night
Yeah.
after.
I don't disagree with that. And yeah, so we do a debrief after those mediations. And it is important, right? Because there's a lot to process. And I don't want women to go back thinking, um, second guessing themselves. Because I told my client, I said, you've made so much progress
Mm-hmm.
in navigating through this that we just need to, yeah, focus forward.
Yeah. Okay. And then one other thing I wanted to ask in terms of valuations, because this comes up all the time, where our people are like, okay, I have this, there's this property, or there's these coins, or there's other things, a classic car. Like, how do people even know where to start with finding the person to do those valuations? Do you do that? I'm guessing you don't, or you
So,
do?
well, no, but I find the people.
Yeah.
So I've got the classic car expert. I've got the coin base is a little tricky, but you can find, we've been able to find some dealers that will help us. I've had a couple clients that have used certain apps for that, but yeah, that's really part of, again, identifying the gaps. Part of my role is to make sure that we're not, I'm just not saying, hey, here's a name. I'm actually pulling that person in as part of the team, overseeing it, which I think is important. So there's this level of accountability that I am able to provide as well. Like, hey, listen, we said that you said we were going to have the report on the 15th, and it's the 20th, and we still don't have it. Where are we at? So I can kind of be that, again, that advocacy piece as people are going through that, not just, hey, here's a bunch of names and call them. I'm pulling them in, and they know that as part of, being on part of my team, they're like, oh yeah, and Rhonda's going to be holding me accountable to this,
Yeah.
so it's certainly helpful. I know there's a couple other questions that came in that I wanted to just address on the separate property side. So the separate property certainly is an important part of the conversation as well, because people will say, well, yeah, I had that before we got married. And at the end of the day, each state handles that a little bit differently. So the marital property states, for the most part, everything's marital, right? But there's always this, nothing's black and white. So I always suggest people need to get documentation, right? Again, verify. There's an analysis that we can do on separate versus marital property. It's a pretty extensive analysis to be able to determine that. But really, you need somebody who's going to look at that piece of it. And if you have your spouse who is saying, hey, listen, this is separate property and I brought this into the marriage, and okay, well, then we need documentation for that. And the tricky part is, especially for the long-term marriages, they say a lot of times people don't have that. So you're like, okay, well, the banks will hold the documents for up to 8 years typically. And so if it's, 15, 20 years, the person who's making that claim really needs to have the documentation. And so if they can't provide it, we're not just going to, I encourage my clients to not just take their word for it.
Right.
Right. And the attorney should be too. I mean, ultimately, it's like they're the ones who have to provide that documentation.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of what you do is you actually connect people to resources so they don't have to do it themselves, because again, the word we hear is overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. I don't even know
That's
where
right.
to start.
And here's the thing, again, when you and I started in this business, 9 years ago, there were very few people in this space. And since that time, there's been a lot of people. And I only make referrals to people that I have vetted. And the vetting process for me is what I call the CIA. So it's communicative, right? Are they transparent? Are they respectful? Are they timely in their communication? The second piece is, do they have integrity? I will not work with anybody who I feel like is going to be shady. Absolutely not. And then the third piece is the A, which is advocacy. And I know that not everybody advocates. I mean, I just changed my podcast title to Disrupting Divorce. And part of that is because I think that there's a better way. And I feel like not enough people are willing to advocate. And as you know, there's a cost to that. We're putting ourselves out there. We're challenging the status quo. We're not just being the yes person. And while my job is not to make enemies, there's going to be people that get ticked off about that, because but I can't do it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, so one of the notes that I was looking to remember before was about advocacy. And we see it all the time where people say, I want to help others, but they're still in the middle of their case. And so I actually interviewed a woman named Caroline Strawson about it, and she said that it's actually a trauma response for people to say, I want to help, I want to do all these things, I want to change the laws, and that it's easier for people like us to focus on other people's
Yes.
needs. But it's really important to come back and say, I have to work on my own case. It's hard. It's hard to stop spinning in different directions,
Yep.
but to recognize that about yourself. Because there's a lot of really exhausted people who are like, I'm just trying to do good. I'm like, just try to recognize that, like, for later.
Yeah.
Once there's only so much energy. So let's work on you dealing with your own case. And, Rhonda, I'm hesitant to work with people who are still in the middle, who are like, I want to advocate, because I feel like it's hard to get them into the mindset sometimes of like, we're not going to advocate now. Like, I certainly, obviously support advocacy because that's what I've been doing myself. But when you're still putting out like huge fires, you just don't have the strength to focus on those things right now.
Well, and I just think about the work that we do. I mean, at the end of the day, and again, life happens, but at the end of the day, if I was dealing still with my own trauma and there's no way. I mean, I have to bring every ounce of energy and self-care to deal and help, right? I mean, and to deal with the situations that we deal with when most of the people that we're working with are going through trauma. I can't be going through my own trauma and really showing up in the best place that I can. I mean, it's exhausting work, right? I mean, worth it, but it's exhausting for those of us who've said, listen, this is my life calling and I'm committed to it. But we have to be on the other side and have dealt with a lot of that trauma.
There it is, on the other side, not in the middle of it.
No. And you know what? Here's the other thing. There's even times that from professional to professional, right? There may be challenges, right? Like I've really had to work through that so that I can show up with even other professionals that aren't maybe aware of their trauma. They're not operating from a trauma-informed position, right? And so it never goes away. We're always going to be interacting with people that are challenging. But I think for those of us who are in this space, we need to be showing up. We owe it to our clients. We owe it to the people that we're advocating for to have and show up in the best way possible.
Yeah. So we need to work through our own stuff. All of us need to work through our own stuff to be better professionals, parents, people. Yeah. Okay. So just before we wind it up, how can people find you? What do you want people to know about you before we leave?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, I am an advocate for women. That is really who I am and what I do. I love it. I love being able to help move the needle. I love being able to help women walk in their power and be confident, right? My job with them is limited. And once the divorce is over and we do the wrap up, they're on their way. And so if I have a short period of time to really make an impact in their life, and I'm committed to doing that. But they can reach me on Instagram at Rhonda Noordyk. They can also check out my podcast called Disrupting Divorce, Conversations for Women. And then the last way that they could reach out would be via my website, wfwcdivorce.com.
Great.
And yeah, would love for people to reach out if there's any way that I can help, or if this message today resonated with them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Rhonda.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day, Lisa.
All right. You too. Bye.